In today's video, we're taking a look at the Quinn Hughes situation with the Vancouver Canucks. After it was revealed by President Jim Rutherford, he has ambitions to play with his brothers here in the upcoming years. Jeff Marek and Greg Wyshynski discuss on Jeff's program today about do they have a Matthew Tkachuk situation on their hands, and will the Canucks kind of be forced into a bad predicament like the Flames were? We'll discuss how that could play out, what a trade could look like, and what is the likelihood of something like that happening. Plus, we have some more information from Elliotte Friedman and a few other sources regarding the little bit more backstory on the New York Islanders moving on from Lou Lamoriello. Who are some of the candidates that could be the next GM of the Islanders, the future of Patrick Waugh. Plus, the Bruins had a very interesting, almost what I'd call somewhat embarrassing press conference today. A lot of attitude given towards reporters and some interesting questions asked and answers given. So we'll discuss the Bruins situation there as well, and some other news around the league coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some interesting information to go over here today. We're going to look at Quinn Hughes, the Bruins, the Islanders, and a few other quick notes, which we'll start with here today. A longtime NHL player, and mostly with the New York Islanders, what he's most probably best known for. Cal Clutterbuck has posted a video today confirming he's retiring from the NHL. Not a huge surprise. He didn't play this past year, but he has made it official. Over 1,000 games played. To shy of 300 points, was a very long time part of that Islanders, what they call the identity line with Clutterbuck, Martin, and Casey Cizikas. So certainly had a pretty respectable career for sure. Certainly want to wish him the best on whatever's next. Clutterbuck's name actually will come up again in this video in a little bit when we talk about the New York Islanders. So stay tuned for that. The Philadelphia Flyers today confirmed that, of course, we know they're in the market for a new head coach. They've confirmed today that they're also not retaining assistant coaches Rocky Thompson or Darryl Williams. So they're both going to be moving on as well. So there'll be some openings not only for a head coach, but for some assistants there as well. In Colorado tonight in the playoffs, we're expecting Landeskog to make his return. But again, are they going to mess with us, put him out for warm-up, and then say he's not playing? I don't know. But the long-anticipated reunion here of Landeskog with his team was expected to happen on home ice. So the feeling around the league is that it's most likely going to happen tonight. But according to Jared Bednar, we're going to have to tune in and find out. So we'll see on that. And in Edmonton, we're expecting Jeff Skinner and Jeff Brown to come out of the lineup and John Klingberg and Evander Kane to go in. So we should hopefully see a different result there. In last night's playoff action, of course, we had some interesting matchups. We had the Carolina Hurricanes take a 2-0 series lead over New Jersey. The Devils certainly had a short lead for a period of time. The Canes came back. It was a very tight checking game, but they did get the 2-1 victory in Carolina there. And then, of course, in Ottawa and Toronto, the Battle of Ontario was a lot closer. The Sens were a lot more disciplined. They found their game in probably the final 40 minutes. Got it tied up, went to overtime. Unfortunately for Ottawa, Toronto did get a overtime victory with a goal from Max Domi. Basically, it was a turnover on the offensive zone. Drake Batherson made what turned out now, I'm sure at the time he thought it might have been a good idea, but a bad pass, a cross-ice pass trying to hit Dylan Cousins. Simon Benoit picks it off, goes down, gets it to Domi, and then, of course, Benoit drives the net, creates a screen, and Ullmark never saw anything. Didn't have a chance on that goal. Cousins and Batherson also had a chance on the back check to stop Domi, and they failed to do so. So I know Drake Batherson in his post-game media or today that they talked in the morning after they skated this morning certainly took a lot of responsibility for that. And, you live and learn. Bad mistake, but he's been one of their better players. So hopefully he doesn't dwell on it too much. I know Travis Green made mention as well that he pulled him aside quickly after that happened last night just to give him some words of encouragement because he has been really good. That was a big mistake. Sure, it happens, but you got to learn from it is the only thing. And Ottawa needs to get back in this series. They need to have a chance to win on home ice with a better Linus Ullmark and a better start to their game. So we'll see. Same thing with the Devils. Carolina obviously was started at home, so the series there shifted to New Jersey, and both teams have to right the ship quickly, or we could have a short series on both those fronts. We also saw the Battle of the State of Florida get underway last night as well with the Panthers and Lightning, and it was very lopsided. The Panthers absolutely crushed the Lightning, so that was a little surprising, and it wasn't closer, to be honest. Anthony Cirelli also did get hurt and leave the game. We don't know his status, so that'll be something to monitor there. So 1-0 Panthers so far, and then the Minnesota Wild had a big game last night, beating Vegas to tie that series up at 1. They they got a lot good offense from Bolding, Kaprizov, etc., and they really took it to them early. It was a good start for Vegas, but once Minnesota got going, they really hammered them down. I believe at one point it was 4-0, and they held on for the victory. Now, as I mentioned, some other news around the league today. We got a bit more information on the Islanders situation with Lou Lamoriello from Elliot Friedman on his podcast this morning, and some other topics. Other sources already came up as well. A little bit more details from Chris Botta, of course, who's a very good source for the team, used to work for the team as well. But Lou apparently was close to being fired in December. Friedman said that he had heard that they were close to making a decision at that point in the season, but obviously they didn't pull the trigger. There was reports of Lou not seeing eye to eye, not only with Patrick Roy, but with John Collins as well, who was the minority owner that's kind of representing ownership there, dealing more with the operations side of the team. So Lou kind of wasn't seeing eye to eye with anybody. I'm suspecting that he and Wall obviously had issues over the roster. I'm sure that in the case of Collins, there was probably, maybe more push for change, and maybe he wasn't feeling it. I don't know, but we know that he was butting heads with both those guys, which obviously played a big role in his in those relationships and the fact that they weren't seeing eye to eye. So obviously, based on what Chris Botta said, he said if it was up to Lou, he wouldn't have left. This was if he was to be able to continue if his contract wasn't expired or whatever. Not to say that the Islanders wouldn't have moved on anyway, but it's not a decision that Lou would have said, okay, I need to step away, I need to resign, I need to move on. Nothing. He would have very easily kept going. There wouldn't have been no change if it was up to him. As far as who could replace Lou, it's believed they're probably going to go with a two-prong approach here and have a president and a general manager. I know Friedman made mentions of people like Ken Holland or Eddie Olczyk as potential candidates for the presidency. Could be others involved too as well, but those are a couple names that are out there. From the GM side, apparently there's already been some talks regarding former Habs GM Marc Bergevin and former Blue Jackets general manager Jarmo Kekalainen. They both, according to Elliot, will be major candidates. And he also wonders if they want to get somebody who has more of a closer tie to the team. He said somebody who bleeds Islander blue in the front office as well, not necessarily as a GM, but maybe as an assistant GM or in a consultant role, somebody who they can, start to groom to be a bigger role down the road, just to have, that different type of voice within that group. So looking at guys like, the recently retired Matt Martin, or the recently retired Cal Clutterbuck, or recently retired Josh Bailey, or Thomas Hickey, who's doing great things with broadcasting now. Would any of those guys be interested in going into a front office role just to give a different perspective on things and maybe to see if they're, able to be interested in being in a position to be groomed for a longer term, bigger role with the team down the road. So we'll see how that goes on that front, but some interesting backstory there on the Islanders. As far as Patrick Roy goes, like I said, the new GM will make the call on whether or not that coaching staff, including Wall, will stay on. But the general belief is that considering the butting of heads with Wall and Lou and the fact of his history and how things went in the Avalanche, that there's a pretty good chance Wall will probably be let go. But we'll have to wait and see. You never know. Maybe he gives him a little bit of time. I don't know. But either way, questions remain on that front for the time being. Now, as I mentioned, the Bruins also finally held their end-of-season media availability today. And some words that reporters are using to describe how things went today would include embarrassing, arrogant, condescending, snarky. So, it starts with they got Charlie Jacobs, Cam Neely, Don Sweeney, all present. Jacobs starts the conference off with some opening remarks. Cam and Don also have some opening remarks. And Jacobs' remarks, he says that he shares the fans' feelings of disappointment and embarrassment. Like, embarrassment's a pretty big word. I mean, they dropped to the bottom of the conference, and that's not, typical Bruins hockey. But all teams go through this, and based on all the selling you did at the trade deadline and how this roster was constructed, I don't know if that was embarrassing, and I don't know that fans should feel embarrassed for the team. I mean, I thought it was a little harsh. I mean, I can understand that they're disappointed with how things went, but they had to know with the moves they were making at the deadline that it was going to get worse before it gets better. So I just found that a little bit interesting. Once they got through their opening remarks and start taking questions from reporters, I just felt they were very, like I said, just kind of defensive, snarky, condescending with the reporters. I listened to the whole thing just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And, they were asked, like, one of the questions was why are, or some of the coaches given a different standard than these front office. That was directed towards Charlie Jacobs, saying, essentially you've been through, 3 coaches now in 4 years. If you look back, you went through Claude Julien, Bruce Cassidy, how those situations were handled, and you go from Cassidy to Monty to Sacco. Why were those guys handled so much differently where this front office has been here for so long? Why is it not time for a change there? You're held to a whole different standard. And he basically said that head coaches have a completely different shelf life. And he feels that, Don and Cam are in the right positions, the right people in the right positions or right chairs, I think he said. So, ultimately, it's kind of a weird answer. I mean, it's not shocking that a head coach has a shorter lifespan, but just didn't really get into the fact that they've been there a long time and, maybe it's time for a change there. They were certainly asked about their drafting and developing as well. Cam Neely got very defensive on that one. The reporter that asked that question was basically how they, haven't had a lot of success in drafting and developing and how, a lot of picks haven't hit, that type of thing. And he cut him off before the question was even out. It went on to reference, what do you mean? Where we've traded a lot of first round picks, and went on even started talking about in 2015, those 3 picks in a row. You can even look more recently, to be honest. I thought it was a very fair question. I mean, with who they've picked, I mean, they haven't all been terrible players, but look at the misses here. Look at 2017 when they had Urho Vakanainen as their first pick. The next 2 picks were Josh Norris and Robert Thomas. That would have been a great player to have on your roster. 2019, they took John Beecher at number 30. The next centerman that went was Shane Pinto. That would have been an upgrade on that pick. In 2021, he took Fabian Lysell. 2 picks later, Wyatt Johnston. That would have been an upgrade. 2022, Matt Poitras was taken 54th overall. Not long after, Lane Hudson. So, I think that they were totally fair to ask this question. But again, complete defensiveness and snarky and just kind of on how they answered in return. Just, I don't know, I felt it very interesting. And even with Don Sweeney sitting there, they were asked about his contract, and Don confirmed. He said, yes, there's no reports out there saying that I'm in my last year of my contract. I've said that myself. That is true. And then they asked Cam about an extension, and it's just kind of weird. Sweeney sitting right here, and Neely asked, and he said, I haven't decided yet. I don't know what's best for the organization. Just okay. Meanwhile, he goes on to praise Don and the job that he and his staff have done. They talked about goaltending. Said that they felt that Korpisalo should have probably played more, that maybe Swayman was overplayed, and that maybe that they should have allocated things differently in that way, and they'll probably look to that next year. They referenced Korpisalo's comments about wanting to play more. I don't really think Korpisalo earned any more playing time. So, yeah, I can understand Swayman, and same thing with Allmark and Ottawa. They're both played more this year than they were ever used to before because they've been in tandem for so long. But, if they're going to be starting goaltenders and make the big money, that's kind of what has to come with the job. They also said there's going to be a full coaching search that'll be coming up as well. Sacco will be considered. Doesn't sound like he's going to stand a chance to get it, though, to be honest. They've known him a long time. He's been there a long time. If they were comfortable with him being the head coach longer term, I think they would probably just give it to him. I have very little faith that they're going to turn around and offer that. Anyways, they said there's lots of candidates they've already kind of got in mind. Some might be still in the playoffs. Some might be available now. So there's different things they're looking at. Also said that they were, as far as what they're looking for to make the team better, they want to address scoring on the wings was the primary thing. Obviously, they talked a lot about getting healthy as well because they had some key defensemen miss time this year. But scoring on the wings, to some degree that's important, but I'd be looking at center ice. I can't believe center ice is not their primary focus. I found that quite surprising as well. Obviously, just like I said, and just generally speaking, the fact that they're pretty confident and comfortable that they can get this team back to being a playoff team next year. So they're dead last in the conference, and they think in 1 year's time they can get back to the playoffs. Now, I can understand that being your goal, but just the fact that just their tone, it just came off, like I said, very arrogant and condescending and, interesting. I know Don Sweeney was also asked about the fact they've gone through there've been a lot of coaching changes recently. Does he feel like that was going to be a deterrent in attracting anybody to come who might be interested in the coaching position. And he said, you mean from the head coaches? Like, he's like, we're an original 6 franchise with like 100-year history. Like, anybody would want to coach, this team. He's like, if anybody turns me down for an interview, we're not interested in coaching the Boston Bruins, I'll give you a call and let you know. It's like, just real cocky, arrogant. I just didn't like their tone at all. To me, it sounded like they were going to take some of the blame for the lack of success this year. But then they really got defensive when we were probed by reporters for any question. So we'll see. So it kind of gave us an indication of what we might do. Like, will I see a goalie trade? I mean, I wondered about the future of Swayman. Doesn't sound like it. But then again, that's not probably right at the top of their list. It would probably depend on what, somebody approaches them with the right offer maybe. Like, we learned about the coach. They're looking for scoring wingers, getting healthy. And I think they can be a playoff team as early as next year. And Sweeney and Neely appear to be going nowheres. And we'll have to wait and see if Don Sweeney is going to be extended, though. But at least going nowheres for at least the time being. Word today that the New York Rangers owner James Dolan has confirmed that GM Chris Drury has inked a multi-year contract extension to remain with the Rangers as their general manager. Now, of course, we've talked about at great lengths all the different things that happened to the Rangers this year, what went wrong, what we could see moving forward. And to be completely honest, I really think Drury could, certainly take his fair share of the blame on how things are handled managerial-wise. But obviously, the owner doesn't see any issues and is happy with the work that he's done and sees him being a big part of the organization. So Chris Drury has inked an extension. So he's not going, and not only is he not going to be fired for sure, but he's going to be likely safe for an extended period of time. And there's also a rumor as well going around. This came from Sammy Silver, who writes for the Hockey News. She's more of a Capitals writer, but certainly has sources around the league. Says she had a connection through the Philadelphia Flyers organization who let her know that the Rangers apparently are interested in John Tortorella. The source told her that the owner, Dolan, wants Tortorella back. Of course, he was in New York before. Of course, they are very familiar with him there, and that he wants him to be the next Rangers head coach. Now, Arthur Staple, who's probably a better source of information when it comes to the New York area teams and the Rangers specifically, who he writes for them for The Athletic, he says that he's heard nothing like this and doesn't appear to be anything to that. But of course, I had mentioned before that was just my own speculation without any sources, that I wondered about Tortorella and the Rangers, if there could be any kind of a reunion there. I would suspect they're going to go with another experienced coach, and obviously Torts is available, so we'll see what happens. But rumor out there that he could be, but right now it's hard to say if there's anything to that. Now, of course, as we know, Jim Rutherford gave us a big soundbite, a big headline the other day on Vancouver's media availability, saying we all know Quinn Hughes wants to play with his brothers. And of course, he's got a couple years before he can be a free agent and make it happen on his own. But I know on today's Jeff Merrick show, the sheet, courtesy of Daily Faceoff, he was talking with his regular guest, Greg Wyshynski, who joins him every Wednesday, and they were talking about the situation. And they were kind of, trying to determine, do they have a Matthew Tkachuk situation on their hands? Could Quinn Hughes play that card? We know Quinn Hughes is very, very fond of Rick Tocchet, loves him as a coach, feels like he's helped him a lot, and still really enjoys that relationship. And I'm sure he probably hopes Tocchet comes back. But to be honest, it doesn't look good for Tocchet coming back. The anticipation here is that Tocchet's going to take a week or so to make a decision, and he's probably waiting to see what else is out there before he decides. That's not a good idea. Like, that's not confidence building that he's going to come back. So, okay, you take away the coach that he likes. Okay, not to say he won't like the next guy, but you don't know that just yet, right? Go through all the drama you did this year. He wants to play with his brother. You went from being a division winner who you thought maybe you're getting close to being a contender to being out of the playoffs. You got your top centerman who's broken. You're trying to figure out, do we trade him? Do we fix him? Can we fix him? All those questions. So anyways, they essentially were discussing that scenario, and it's the worst case scenario is that they end up in a situation like the Flames with Quinn Hughes here, that Calgary did with Matthew Tkachuk, and say, in a year's time when he can be extended, he says, you know what, I'm not going to extend. I really want to play with my brothers. If you want to trade me to New Jersey, I'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to sign there next year. And that puts him in an awfully predicament. Now, they talked about on the program that clearly, the Devils have a lot of assets that Vancouver might like if they did pull off that trade. I don't see that being a discussion anytime here soon. I mean, maybe, but it's probably a conversation more so for next year, because I would think they would try everything they could to get Quinn to be, a happy player, wanting to be there, at least get to the point where they can open negotiations on a new contract, and then see, unless he goes to them now and says, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to sign a new deal. So if you want to move into New Jersey now, you can. And if not, then I'm going to probably look to go there when I'm free agent. Looking at what a deal could look like, essentially, here's what they kind of come up with. They basically said probably start with a top defenseman that's younger. May not have the Quinn Hughes skill, but Simon Nemec would be a great starting point. You're probably looking at a top roster player like a Jesper Bratt or Nico Hischier. And then you're looking at probably more than that as well. That's just your starting point, right? So you're looking at Nemec, Hischier, and then there's probably going to be something else in there as well. Now, is New Jersey going to want to do that to get Quinn Hughes? To be honest, they might. They very well just might. I mean, if you think about, we know what Jack Hughes is. We have a better idea where he is, where Luke Hughes is still young enough that we don't quite know what his ceiling is yet, but you imagine all three of them playing together would be extremely dynamic. I can see them moving, one of those two forwards and Nemec, and probably, I'm not sure what else would have to go in there. Maybe you're looking at a first round pick. Maybe you're looking at another prospect. A couple of other assets in there for sure. Quinn Hughes is one of the best players in the game. He's going to command, probably 4 to 5 assets, unless the New Jersey tries to squeeze them because of lack of leverage, which unfortunately could happen as well. Elliot Friedman made mention on his podcast today that, because he talked about this a little bit as well, that as far as he knows, Jack and Luke have no desire to go to Vancouver. So if the three brothers are going to play together anytime soon at all, it would have to be in New Jersey. Unless the only other possibility, like I said, is that the Canucks can do enough to make Quinn happy enough to re-sign for at least a little bit longer, and that maybe they hook up later in their careers. Like, what else could Vancouver be up to? Are they going to trade Elias Pettersson? We don't know that yet. I mean, even his agent was on the Donnie and Daly show today talking about what he had planned for the offseason, and said that he wasn't surprised to hear that there's a possible trade that could happen. So it doesn't mean they will. I think it's going to obviously boil down to what potential returns there could be, but there's definitely conversations around it. That's for sure. What else could I do? Because, obviously a Pettersson trade, is that going to instill confidence in Hughes to want to stay? I mean, I know he likes PD, but I don't know really where he stood with the whole Miller-Pettersson thing. It sounds like he was more on Pettersson's side, but if they trade him, what's that going to make him feel like? Could they bring in a guy like Josh Norris, who's his best friend? He just got traded to Buffalo. The odds of being traded again, probably not great, but, would they, because Buffalo was one of the teams that were rumored to be poking around about Pettersson before. If that did come together, would they ship Norris to Vancouver to be, Quinn would love to play with one of his best friends. There's things like that, but it just all seems very unlikely. It's going to be challenging, I think, for the Canucks to put together those things that really make him want to stay. I'm not saying he's a goner, because I don't know what's going through Quinn Hughes' mind, and maybe the bigger factor here is that the team was just more competitive. They have lots of other things they can do over the next year or two to make that better, and if those things go well, maybe there's a better chance. But if they do have to end up in a situation like the Flames did with Tkachuk, they could be looking at a substantial trade here that could set the team back. There's no doubt. When you're trading the best player, it's almost impossible to win those deals. So we'll have to wait and see here what happens. But certainly let me know your thoughts on a potential Quinn Hughes trade to New Jersey. If it does happen sometime in the next year, what do you think it needs to look like? Does the Devils have the ability to squeeze him here with not much leverage? Or is this really going to screw Vancouver over, depending on how everything goes here? Like, they could be a team that's absolutely doomed depending on how this goes. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.